All right. Welcome to episode 2 of HorrorRant with myself, Band Aid Specialist, and Mr. HorrorRant himself. Tonight we are going to review A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, and then we are going to review Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. Callum, do you have anything before we hop over to the trailer?
So, Nightmare 5 and Nightmare 6, towards the latter end of the franchise. Obviously, massive decline in quality of the film, non-involvement whatsoever from the original creator and director Wes Craven. But they still could be fun movies, maybe. Who knows? I mean, what we're going to find out.
All right, with that, please enjoy the trailer. And again, mind you, this movie is from 1989, so the quality may not be perfect.
His mother was a God-fearing woman. His birth was an unspeakable horror.
Please don't let him do that!
His life and death have been one incredible nightmare. But now all that is going to change because Freddy wants to become a daddy.
Want to make babies?
What's wrong with me? You're just a little pregnant.
Even if he has to adopt.
No!
Do unborn babies dream?
When it comes to chills.
It happened while I was awake.
When it comes to screams.
The party just start.
When it comes to pure terror.
Bon appetit.
No one delivers like Freddy.
Better buckle up.
All right, Krueger. This time it's for keeps.
A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child.
It's a boy.
When it comes to terror, remember, Freddy knows best.
Wow. So, there's so much to dissect from that. I think number one is probably going to be their Freddy wants to become a dad, even if he has to adopt. I mean, I guess kudos to the marketing team.
Yeah.
It tried to go after young parents, but
You know, I will give him credit. It is a very creative premise. It's so different from what they've attempted to do in the previous 4 films.
I guess it tries to make it family friendly. I'll give I'll give them that one.
Yeah, it's just, it's so cheesy. It's so beyond.
It's oh my gosh, it's almost no better than number 4. The movie I think is substantially better, but I mean number 4 and number 2 don't really leave any issues for room for improvement. So let me see. I enjoyed this one. For a couple of reasons. I liked that they brought Alice back. Lisa Wilcox, I think she's a phenomenal actress. However, there was some significant deviation from the 4th one, which may be for better or worse. Number one, and I may have missed something in the 4th one, so if I did, by all means, please correct me. But all of the unrealistic powers that she had in the real world are non-existent. It's almost like it was a scratch off. It didn't happen. We're sorry. But anyway, that was my first thoughts. Go ahead, Colin.
Yeah, do you know what? I know I hated Alice in part 4, but I actually really enjoy her in this movie. I know I criticised the fuck out of her last time, but I think she's actually she's quite decent in this one. She's obviously introduced from the get-go again as a reminder in what I think is such a good opening sequence. Obviously, her and Dan are having sex, and then she gets a shower, and then it starts filling up and she starts drowning. You finally see some tits as well. And then obviously she ends up in the position of Amanda Kruger in the asylum and stuff. I thought that was a really well executed opener. It was like quite endearing and stuff to see that. It was fun. It was different. But yeah, Alice from the get-go, I feel like this is her movie. She's had a strong start compared to how she was in part 4. She's a lot better. She seems, obviously after the things she's gone through in part 4, she's had a complete 180 and she's a different person. But I do agree, the power aspects of like she absorbed the friend traits and stuff of her friends, that was missing obviously in this film of her as a character. So it does make you question how much effort went into making that and writing the script.
Well, so that's kind of where I go back to the idea of maybe they realized
It doesn't work.
yeah, and I mean, how can it? And this isn't the first time that they would have deviated from the nightmare aspect. In later films, they tried it again. I think they were a little bit more subtle in how they went about it, which, I mean, I guess kinda. So as we'll talk about here for the next one, they really started to creep in to realistic versus the fantasy nightmare portion where Freddy's supposed to be king of. But so yeah, I did like the opening sequence. I thought it was more sensual for a it was much more sensual for a nightmare film. However, it started off as like that easygoing, like who are these people kind of deal for anybody that wasn't familiar with the film when they were walking into the theater or even down the line when it came out on VHS and DVD. But then it kind of started that weird string that Nightmare on Elm Street was famous for, and that was the shower scene, that all of a sudden this weird shit's happening and it shouldn't be. Now, I do have to say that out of any of the predecessors, I think it was a little bit more gruesome and not so much gory, but definitely the kills were creative. Dan, for instance, yeah,
I love that kill. It's such a good sequence.
which ultimately, I mean, if you really think about it, he runs into a tractor trailer. But when you go into the dreamland aspect of it, and when he becomes one with the crotch rocket, like that somebody had to sit there and nobody could really deny the creativity that came from that.
Yeah, like it was balls to the walls and stuff. It's full of Freddy one-liners as well. Like, I can't believe the speed. I do like the sequence where he's in his truck when he's obviously just starting the dream and stuff, and Freddy's got, I think it's a bottle of champagne, because he's on his way on. We've just celebrated the graduation, and he drinks and it's like acid, and then he like burns himself, so he rips off his arm and uses that as a belt buckle.
which again, I mean, I'm torn with that one, and I'm torn only because it starts to go back into that funny Freddy, but it stayed in that gruesome sequence because Freddy Krueger or not, somebody's getting their arm ripped off, which is brutal, especially for this franchise.
Oh, yeah.
Now, oof. I do have to say though, there's one kill in particular in this film, um,
Is
that
it
I
Mark?
that I didn't like. Well, so Mark's situation I loved, and the reason I loved it is because it went into a comic book world. It was filled with that L.A. noir kind of backdrop, which was awesome. I didn't really like that Freddy became essentially the evil shithead Superman.
Oh, Super Freddy.
Right, but that's one thing I thought was cool. But the kill that I hated the most, and it was because it was weird and grotesque, was
Was it
Greta.
Greta? Oh my god, no! That is such. I think that's the best death in this film. I thought she was.
Really?
It was so disturbing, and it had so many comedy elements. Oh my god, Bon appetit, bitch! I
So
thought that was genius.
so it might have been not even so much the comical aspect of it. I think it was how she looked. So even working on an ambulance, there are two things in specifics that I can't stand, and it's human vomit and human feces. So I think because her face was puffed out that much, and with all the food in her mouth, it kind of resembled an emesis type base. I think maybe that's what turned me off. That, and when you push over into the real time, the real world, her dying, it was kind of weird. I thought her acting was phenomenal. I thought Erica Anderson's acting was top. But just the presentation of it, because essentially, if you really look at it, it looks like somebody's trying to give her the Heimlich that's not there, and then she's just choking to death. But obviously, that's not the case because we got to see it from both parts, the nightmare aspect and then the real time. But I mean, that was really the only one I can think of that might have churned me, just a tiny bit.
It's quite hard for a film that's only got 3 death scenes in. I think it was the lowest in the entire franchise.
Yes.
And most of them had to be like reshot and censored because of a rating. They didn't want to get an X rating, I think it was. So they cut quite a bit out and stuff. But no, I thought Greta's was so well done. It was when he started like cutting her open and feeding this doll. This doll's inside into Greta. I thought that was so sick and twisted, yet so.
That part I did like. I thought
was
that was
funny.
really cool, and the reason I really liked that was because, I mean, it did have its comical aspect, especially when this doll just drops and blows apart once it hits the ground. But the one thing that I absolutely liked about that was that Freddy did a Freddy Krueger thing. He went for that psychological torment to Mark of, hey, so look at your girlfriend now. And that was one really cool thing because it started to go down that dark path again. It might have had that humorous undertone, but dark nonetheless.
And when Alice is trying to get something out of the fridge and stuff, and she opens it and all the food rocks, and you just see Greta choking.
And then the door shuts and what does it say? Die, bitch.
Yeah, something like that.
And yeah, I mean that was cool. I really liked I liked that it also touched a lot more on Freddy Krueger's backstory, and that it involved his mom in even more of an integral role. I didn't like how they defeated him. I thought that was a little quicker than it should have been, but it goes back to it was intelligent, it was creative. Nobody really would have thought of that. I mean, if you look, you have the runner-up, the franchise that was going right with Nightmare would have been Friday the 13th. And what we had, there was essentially a supernatural killer that was killing for his mom that was talking to him. Versus this, where it's an entirely different, motherhood, son aspect, where he's shoved back into the womb,
Like, get fucking back in there.
Right now, again, I almost feel like that was a little bit more lazy because I was expecting the biggest thing of this whole movie was they needed to free Amanda Krueger so that she could assist in stopping it, and absolutely she did by pushing him back into the womb. But one thing that one thing she didn't do is really anything. Yvonne Frieder, and that was, if you're watching it for the first time, you're going in dry. It's late at night. It's dark. That little dead person head turn might have been a nice little jump scare. Maybe not anything crazy, but it was one of those things. Like, it's like, oh yeah, Mama Kruger is going to fuck things up. And there,
she just stands there dressed all in white.
and then has the unborn kid Jacob say, yeah, you need to help her. It's like, what the fuck is this?
While we're on the subject of Yvonne, I think she's such a good character.
I think her acting was phenomenal. I think Kelly Jo Minter's acting was phenomenal.
For a Nightmare film, it was actually really enjoyable. Do you know what? The entire cast in this is a step up from part 4. Even though most of them had barely any screen time, what we did was actually better. They might have had basic character tropes, but they sold me a lot more than the characters in Nightmare 4. And I think that was something.
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Like, you wouldn't expect, like, a sequel to a film that was shit to actually have better acting and better characters. But no, you go into it, you're like, oh, it kind of reminds me of Wrong Turn. Like, number 4, we had normal characters, but then number 1, obviously, we had normal characters. For number 2, we had better characters. Like, I didn't know sequels could do that.
Right? Like, you're not supposed to fuck this up. That's the whole point. Yeah, I mean, even just at the graduation scene in the very beginning, you had not a lot, but you had enough character development to understand the background of these people. Like I had said in the last episode with Nightmare 4, even with Alice, what did we really get? That she had a verbally abusive dad, and that she daydreamed, and that's what the movie was. We didn't really get too much else, and then they pretty much just shit on everything for the third one, or from the third one.
I do like how they brought the dad back, and he was a changed man. Basically, he's not an alcoholic anymore. I think that was quite a nice character development. I didn't expect him to have that 180-degree change of character, but I didn't know this, but there was a death scene filmed in, I think, Nightmare 4 for him.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, and they cut it, apparently.
See, let's pretend Nightmare 5 didn't happen. If they did that in Nightmare 4, given the verbally abusive person that we had saw, I don't know that I or many others like me would have been in disagreement with it, but because, I mean, you don't ever want really the bad guy to win, with some exceptions. You don't, but like you said, I mean, that's phenomenal character development, where he's a dad. He's, even when his daughter comes out and she admits she's having a baby out of wedlock, and now the dad died, all of that, or Dan.
Yeah.
And
Poor Dan.
Yeah, and he was fine with
He was
it.
such a nice guy.
Yeah, and it's I like that, because I don't know if it really showed realism there, but it definitely showed some kind of compassion that we didn't see in the fourth one, and it definitely makes sense, being that the fourth one was trash and we wanted to step up at the fifth one. So I absolutely love that.
But then you've got this other interesting aspect of it as well. Like, obviously, when Alice starts going around saying Freddy's back, this and that, and Dan's parents are completely shutting her out, convinced she's delusional and crazy, and we're offering to demanding the baby when it's born so they can raise it as of their own. And, like, that's quite an interesting path they could have taken. They could have explored more with that, and they just sort of forgot about it about halfway through the film. You're like, you had so much potential to do something completely different, and you just fully stepped over it.
Oh, absolutely. Even with I have to say I wasn't a. It was an interesting turn of events to see that an unborn baby that was dreaming, which is an interesting plot twist.
Oh yeah,
That's how Freddy got back in, and I thought that was cool.
I did like the resurrection of how Freddy came back when you see little mangled Freddy crawling into his old clothes and stuff, and then you just see him rising out in the church where he died in part 4, and all his limbs are extending, he's coming together, and he's like, "It's a boy."
I did.
And like,
I did like that one. That was definitely something else.
yeah,
It was. Yeah, I don't know. I liked it. Like I said, I definitely liked it more than 4. I can't ever get around that. But yeah, it was strange.
it was interesting as well. It made just under half of the box office that Part 4 made. So Part 4 made 49 million. This one made 22 million. But yeah, it was the highest grossing slasher of 1989. And I think the only other slashers around at that time were Halloween 5 and Jason Takes Manhattan. So Friday the 13th Part 8, which I know you love.
That's my favorite one. As much as everybody hates it, I don't care. I'm all for it. And it's just because it takes him out of Crystal Lake. But yeah, I mean, part of me, and it could have just been that year. Absolutely, it could have been. But part of me wants to believe that the downfall of their box office gross was because everybody went for Part 4, and I'm sure they thought it was going to be something similar to Part 3, and it wasn't. It was trash. So I think that kind of deterred people, which again makes sense, and it is what it is. But something that really intrigues me, though, is if you look at the lowest number for the budget of Part 4 is $6.5 million.
Yeah.
And the budget for Part 5 was $8 million. And they did a phenomenally better job. The kills were definitely unique, grotesque or not. It brought, even though there was humor to it, it had an evil Freddy in it. And I don't think it went downhill like it did. If anything, I think it recouped the series.
See, before my rewatch, I despised this film. Bear in mind, this was when I was younger, and I was researching all the horror Freddy films, because I used to be obsessed with them, even though I'd never seen them. I was like, oh yeah, this one, that one, even though I've never seen any of them. This one was the one I was most intrigued of, because obviously the Dream Child, and it's that picture on the poster of that little the pram, the stroller, where with this gothic design, and it just looked compelling and so interesting. And then watching it, I think it was a few years ago I watched it, and it was just such a letdown to what I had envisioned in my head. And then obviously I watched it very recently for the review, and I actually enjoyed it a bit more. I was like, oh, do you know what? I think what I completely missed out was the gothic design, the gothic aspect of it. When you go to the asylum and stuff with Yvonne, and you get this beautiful shot of it at night, and all the in the asylum as well, when it's showing Amanda's backstory and is it 100 maniacs she gets raped by?
Yeah, son of 100 maniacs.
Yeah, the shots of them is quite gothic and quite different, and it stands out visually for such a strange reason. And I think that's quite a nice detail that's been added in. Director Stephen Hopkins, I think with what he got given, I think he did an all right job, to be fair.
Which, in all fairness, Hawkins he does a good job. It's just, and I this doesn't account for everybody, but if you really look at the track record, great director, great anything or not, when you come into an already established franchise, it's difficult because you want to live up to the expectations of the original creators, but what ends up happening is they get tunnel vision. That's what they want. and that's not what comes of it. And I'm not a director, I'm not a producer, obviously, so I can't speak truly on their behalf, but they have to be caught somewhere in between that. Just let it free flow, and we have to do better, especially when your predecessor is Nightmare 4 that had a great box office, but
It was
anybody
like quality.
exactly anybody that actually watched it knew that it was trash.
And I think that comes down to the current state of what the films were about. We've gotten so used to this idea of Freddy being more comical now, and I think that kind of just stuck. And in parts it works, but in parts it's overbearing, and you're like, that could have been left out. That just ruins the scene. It's not scary enough. Whereas they could have done something completely different with this idea of having this child that Freddy wants. They could have really gone down a dark turn. They could have brought him back to his roots, like in Nightmare 1, which I thought it could have revitalised the franchise for the better. And obviously, they just stuck to the trend of what Freddy was, and I think that's its greatest downfall. It had so much potential, even with a gimmicky plot. It just fails a little bit more than it succeeds.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I is horrible as this might sound, I would have loved to see that child slasher. The big thing with Freddy Krueger, we all understand his backstory. He was the Springwood slasher. He was, this horrid person, which is fine. But all we're watching is just essentially a revenge story coming after the kids who aren't kids. Essentially, they're teenagers.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, yeah, that's cool. But how many fucking movies are there going to be babysitters and teenagers that are getting the axe? Nobody wants to see a little kid die, but if you're going to make a movie out of somebody that killed kids, maybe we should explore that.
And they could have. But I do think the biggest downfall in this movie is Jacob. That
Yes.
annoying little fucking kid with the shitty makeup and the shitty voice delivery of his lines.
Mm-hmm.
I think what really cemented my hate for him is when Alice is. Well, Freddy's coming out of Alice in what I think is a beautiful shot. Is so dark and sinister.
Oh, yeah.
He's just bursting out of her and he's taking control. And then Jacob realises, oh, I need to save my mum. And then he just turns. So 1 minute he's normal, and then the next minute he turns and he's got this horrid Freddy-like makeup on, which is just so ugly to look at because it doesn't look good in the slightest.
Absolutely, yeah, because he's like Freddy's offspring that doesn't even make sense to the actual storyline other than...
Like, yeah. How is Freddy's DNA in him?
Right.
And then I think he says, she's no fun. I want to hang with you now, or something like that. Something awful and cringe. I very rarely say this, but I really want to punch that kid in its fucking face.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially the way that it's going about is, I want you to teach me.
Teach me, yeah.
But how is he going to teach a burnt fucking face? Like that, the story is that the parents burnt Freddy alive. So where the fuck does this kid get a burnt face from? Like, where are we at?
I know. And then in between all this, towards the end of it, when they think they're going to get away from Freddy, they go into this sequence of stairs everywhere, upside down, going left, right, which is such a cool shot. But we've got that little kid running around in his shitty little pajamas, his little nightgown. It pisses me off. It really pisses me off. And then you got Dan coming back, who's secretly Freddy, and he's just jumping like that, trying to get the little brat. Oh, fucking kill him.
It's So, I mean, going back to the character development, right? So again, I think they did things right this time. Uh, in in succession to Nightmare 4, I think they did things
Yeah,
right.
fully.
However, with Alice, I think they overextended it, and the development ended up being her and this unborn child, which was fine. And I didn't have necessarily a disagreement with Jacob being in the nightmares. I kind of understand, very loosely do I understand the ideology of him being in
Haunted by Freddy or something like that, yeah.
yeah, somebody that's actually able to articulate their feelings or to be manipulated. But jumping back and forth between an unborn fetus to a kid that's like 6, 7, 8, 9, that's where I think it started to lose myself and probably a lot
So,
of people.
yeah.
But and like you even said, like yeah, the labyrinth, moving staircases, upside down staircases, like that was really cool. It not that other movies haven't done that. It was cool in an aspect, but when you're leading up to this finale, and the finale is shit.
Dog shit.
Right. So, it's one of those things. It's almost like a slap to anybody that's watching, because it's like, okay, like we were all for this, and now we're where we should really be excited. The big reveal or whatever the fuck it is. And Freddy gets shoved back into the womb by his mom, who doesn't want to do anything anyway. Where the fuck are we at,
And then she's wiggling about like she's got some uncomfortable constipation. Like,
The
it was more.
when she turned around and was like, "No, take your kid and get out of here," and it was just, it's like, what the fuck? And then both of them shove these kids back into their magical fucking womb. I think was like the cherry topper. And-
Alice was like, "Oh, she can do that, so I can do that." Fucking
Right.
get it.
Now, here is my biggest complaint out of this entire movie. And I want to explore this a little bit more once we get to Freddy's Dead. But Alice disappears. Like we don't see anything from her again, and that's fine. Now, if you actually research it, I guess she had repopulated into the Nightmare on Elm Street comics and all that fun stuff, and it was at that point she had supposedly come back to Springwood, either for or after her dad's death, whatever the case was. But not everybody read the comics, and I'm sure we could find them, but I'm also certain that it's going to be, number one, difficult, and number two, a pretty penny to find these comics anymore. The same thing with the anthology series, Freddy's Nightmares. Like, I think Shudder or Screambox, something like that, just put them on. You have to pay for a premium subscription to watch them. But it's like, these things are almost non-existent anymore. So was it that people didn't, whether the marketing team or the directors or the writers didn't think, that we were all going to live past the year 2000 when Y2K was supposedly going to happen, or they just kind of wanted to write it off thinking that these things would be eternal, and they're not without research.
I fully agree. Yeah, like even though I'm not the biggest fan of Alice, I'm happy she got that ending, this happy ending. Well, it's not really happy because her boyfriend died, and her friends are dead, apart from Yvonne. Love
Right.
Yvonne. But yeah, like, it'd have been nice to see what she's up to in the present day, which they could always revisit in some sort of media or format, but a follow-up to her story after Nightmare 5 would have been nice to see.
Absolutely. And I mean, unfortunately, since Robert Englund is essentially retired from Freddy Krueger, and rightfully so, he's like 74 now.
Oh yeah.
I could only imagine Freddy trying to slash somebody with a fucking cane. But I almost feel like the only way they could revisit that, unless they try and pull somebody else like they did in the Nightmare remake, would be trying to do like a Tales from the Crypt Keeper type deal where it's cartoons.
I was gonna suggest like an anime style one. I'd fucking love that.
I'm not a big fan of anime, but
Oh, not like anime.
just
You know, I
animated.
don't. Yeah, just animated. Yeah.
Which, yeah, I mean, even if they did go the anime route, because I really do enjoy this series, I would still watch it. Even if I don't like that kind of animation, I would still do it.
Yeah, we've got so many opportunities we could do with it. I mean, I know that's that storyline is probably long gone now. There's probably drafts of a sequel involving Alice that would replace Freddy's Dead, somewhere buried. But hopefully, we resurrect someday.
Which I almost feel like I had seen something like that. That was supposed to be an option somewhere. But I would have to look that up. Again,
I think the real box office decline. Obviously, it went from a high number in part 4 and then to this, which is slashed over half of the box office. I think that really cemented the coming of the end of the franchise. So,
it makes sense because if the succeeding movie is Freddy's Dead, and I mean that makes sense. If you go from a trash predecessor of 5, which would have been 4, you go from that with a high box office to 5 that doesn't have any. The studio's not going to be like, fuck yeah, we need another one. No. So I would almost venture to guess, and I don't know this without, again, looking it up. I would almost venture to guess that the studio was like, no, we want to pull the plug. And somebody was like, no, let's finish this off right.
do you know who's probably wanting to keep it going? Bob Shea.
But, so I have the actual reviews for Nightmare on Elm Street 5. Now, these are more recent reviews. I'm sure there are some longer ones. So the first 2 are fairly decent. They're 3 out of 5 stars. So the first one is dealing with the inception and birth of Freddy Krueger. A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5 had every opportunity to be the darkest episode in the franchise. And although it's a good movie, the truth is, with Freddy Krueger becoming ever more comedic, the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise was becoming less about genuinely frightening the audience and more about just entertaining them, which I can't disagree. That's
It got me thinking. I think no matter what we did with this movie, we were screwed anyway, because the fans got used to this comical Freddy, and if you change it just like that, it'll have a bad reception. They'll not see it. It'll just completely turn the fandom against it.
Oh, absolutely.
And then if you went down the scary route, we would have obviously lost the fans. But if he just kept Freddy as he is, then we was just going to lose taste, if you get me. We was going to obviously see a decline in movie quality, and it's evident in the final product. So no matter what we did with this movie, they were fucked.
Oh, yeah. The next one we have here, this is another fair and acceptable sequel, but most of the plot line is way out of hand, which I agree. Most of it is almost like watching a supernatural film, but most of the time it focuses on flashbacks when Freddy's mother was taken to the asylum, raped by a bunch of other people, and then gives birth to Freddy. The plot line kind of blew me away by the time I watched it, although the kills are creative, such as the comic book scene, the dinner scene, and the pool scene. But this film leaves lots of questions on what's going on in the film. I'm going to give it 3 stars, which, yeah, absolutely. Especially, again, I think it focused so much on character development. And one thing that I'm not really sure about is when they showed the Maniac scene, was the intention to make us gain sympathy or empathy for Freddy Krueger or for his mom?
Yeah, like if you're trying to add something to this character, there's no way you could ever empathize with this monster.
Right. It's weird. So, the next one here, there's actually 2 I see. They're not really long reviews, but they're both 1 stars. First one, Freddy is back and using the unborn baby Elisa Wilcox to strike at her friends. I wound up falling asleep at the start of the second act in this boring, lumbering routine movie. Great flamboyant 1980s special effects are a highlight, a 3 out of 10. I don't know why he said a 3 out of 10 and he gave it 1 star.
The maths just doesn't add up.
So,
bit like the plot of the movie.
So I agree with the 1980s special effects. But whereas we might see that as 1980s flamboyant special effects, at that time that kind of stuff was a big deal.
Yeah, because we used, I think it was stop motion for some of the scenes, like the decaying food in the fridge. I think that was stop motion.
Oh yeah.
And again with Yvonne when she's on the diving board and it turns into a Freddy like claw shape. I think that was. I mean, it's not aged perfectly, but for the time, like obviously it would have looked good for then.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean that's the thing is I'm sure many of the people that are giving these reviews the same as us, we weren't alive then.
Yeah.
And hell, even if we were, we probably wouldn't have been old enough to actually go see it in theater. But yeah, I mean, that's one thing that I think some of these are a little too
critical on like
something that people don't really understand.
Yeah, I think they're forgetting that these films were released in a different time with different technology, and they did the best they could with what we've got. Like, obviously, I'd much prefer to see stop motion, even if it's looking grainy and fucked up. I'd much rather see that than some obviously shitty CGI or green screen.
Which oh my god, we have so much CGI anymore. It's unreal. Some CGI is done decently, but I'll never once say that it's done perfectly. So the next negative review, and I want to find one more negative review, and the reason I want to focus, and I feel like I should have did this more for our last episode. The reason I want to focus more on the critical reviews, whether or not they're taking into consideration for the timepiece or the time period rather, is because this again is the successor of one of the worst Nightmare on Elm Street films, and I'm almost more curious to see if people have, if their low ratings are critical for the sake of being critical, or they're critical because they're like, okay, yeah, this is trash, but this is why it's better.
Yeah.
So this one, again, we go back into that time period. So this movie literally turned Freddy into cartoon slasher. These people need to fucking stop. Into cartoon slasher, and that's sad. I don't even want to read this one.
If you think he's a cartoon in this one, just wait till fucking part 6.
You know what? Oh my god, I have so much to touch on that one, but because he used to be scary, but now he a comedy relief. Kills are good. Don't watch this movie. So like that, I almost feel like that's a counterintuitive statement. Kills are good. Don't watch this movie. If you're going into a slasher film, you want the kills to be good.
Yeah.
So why would you not want to watch this movie? Like,
like you don't go into a slasher film expecting to see some fucking ethical topic touched upon. Well, maybe Candyman, but that's a completely different.
Candyman took it a way too far, but I don't think they took it far enough. If that makes sense.
I get you.
The remake, I think, took it incredibly far. But let's see.
Yeah, see, the negative reviews, they feel, well, some of them, I'm not defending this movie because it's shit. It's not in the top tier of like the Freddy movie. It's not in the top tier of the fucking slashers or anything like that. But I feel like people who review it are just, the minds aren't fully open to the fact that this was horror in that time period. It's obviously there's been development and it's evolved. I think this was the start of the decline of the slasher genre, because obviously it's just, I'm going to quote Scream here. It's like, well, I'm going to semi-quote it. It's not elevated as the current horror pieces are getting released now and stuff. It's just rinse and repeat sequels, which is what people wanted to see, and then obviously we got bored of it, so we had to switch it up and change it. Like, before slashers, I'm pretty sure it was... I'm not... Do you know what? I'm not even sure of what the horror genre was before the slashers.
So, I think it really depended, because I have some old school classical monster movies like Dracula, Frankenstein, things like that.
Monster movies, yeah.
And those were the big thing. But the other part that it is not even so much just the monster movies, it's the sci-fi movies. So the Day the Earth Stood Still, that was a big one.
Sci-fi horror, yeah.
Right, and it's like, the reason those were big is we go with the time, because I still remember seeing the original Day the Earth Stood Still with my pap, my grandfather, and he, pretty much explained to me why that was big then, because what was that? I think in the late 40s, 50s, that kind of stuff was not ever really seen. It was just, it was a lot less before then. And then I remember going with my grandfather to see the remake with Keanu Reeves, and he thought it was trash because even though these are good movies, they're glamorized. So I would almost have to imagine, and I'm not defending this movie at all, the same as you said. I do think it's better, but it's going down that dark comedic train.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of these people are caught up on that CGI, that bloodshed, that everything crazy, where, stepping away from part 4, I think this one really started to go more so into the gory, gruesome, grotesque aspect. Not where it's gone, but definitely a start before we even get to Nightmare, or New Nightmare, and before we even get to Freddy versus Jason.
Oh, yeah.
But, so, I'm looking through here, any of the really crummy reviews, I'm not seeing much context of anything. There's one here that I kind of want to touch on, and kind of something we just talked about. It's a 1-star review. Utterly abysmal. How could it have gone this wrong? I've voiced my opinion on Nightmare 2, and obviously we just had Nightmare 4 in the last episode. I don't know what the fuck he's smoking, but he obviously has not seen those. So,
it's really a difference of opinion with these movies. You either love them or you hate them. Like, each one offers something completely different, and it could be to your taste level. Like, for example, you don't like part 2, whereas I think it's a decent movie. And you say you enjoy this one. I think it's not worth watching. So it's just one of those things where people just... I can't put it into words, but I know what I'm thinking.
So one big thing is, like with you and I, right? Perfect example is we can sit on these webisodes and we can discuss our differences in opinion. We're not sitting here and saying this is what's up. We're not
hurt if one of us has a contrasting opinion,
right? And I think this is where humanity's failing overall, is that if I disagree with you, that makes me a dick, or if you disagree with me, you're a dick. And that's not how that works. It's not how discourse works. And the horror genre, and it's not the only genre that does this, but the horror genre is a perfect example. The new Scream. The new Scream is a perfect example of this. On the Woodsboro horror fan, or what is it? Horror.
Woodgrove Horror Film Club. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't know why I kept saying fan. That was like stuck in my head. But regardless of the people that put spoilers out there, that was one big thing, is there were so many people that were like, it sucked. If you think otherwise, you're wrong. There were other people that said, I loved it. If you think otherwise, you're wrong. And then I was on there, and without giving spoilers, I said very openly that I felt incomplete at the end of the movie. I thought it was cool. I thought it took a different path, but I felt incomplete. It could have been because Wes Craven wasn't a part of it. And there were still people on there calling me a dick. it's like, why? So Freddy is a perfect example. It went a different way, but I don't think that it declined. I think
It just stagnated.
Exactly. I think it oversaturated the comedic presence of it without balancing it out. I don't think the comedy was the problem. I think the balance was the problem.
Like, they had all the right ingredients to make each sequel better and beyond. They could have each one of them could have done something new. Like, it's in the title, so Part 3, Dream Warriors, that did something completely different from what was in the previous two films, and that was a phenomenal movie. Part 4, Dream Master, they did something different there. It didn't work necessarily, and then you got Part 5, The Dream Child. They did something different, and again, it didn't work because they're just too. As we've said, they're not finding the right balance. Whereas Part 3 had the perfect balance, and I really think that is something Wes Craven deserves all the credit for, because I know he helped direct it. He gave some involvement into Dream Warriors, and I think that's why people went to watch it and loved it for what it is, because whatever he touches is just beautiful. And the last two movies we've watched, Part 4 and Part 5, there's been no trace of the Wes Craven touch anywhere in it.
I mean, I'll be one of the people to say it's not accented with his genius, and that's where the problem is. Even in his earlier works, you can tell he's meant to be a director. And then just kind of stepping back in time with Nightmare 2. I wouldn't say that I hated it. I hated the direction it went with the franchise, because it broke the bounds that four definitely fucked up, and it was, you have this nightmare goblin, this evil entity, and now he becomes a real life figure. And that's where I didn't like it, because you had Nightmare that set the precedent for what this was. Nightmare 2 had a good idea, but tarnished it. Nightmare 3 rebooted it, and then we just kind of went back downhill.
I fully understand where you're coming from. Yeah, like it's not a franchise that is heavily known for having great films.
Right.
I think each one's known for their weaknesses. They've left such a stain on the genre, but I think because it gets overlooked because of such a fantastic job Robert Englund does in every single one of them. And I think he is what makes any of them watchable, especially Part 4, Part 5, Part 6. He is the franchise, and without him, the franchise would be fuck all. Like,
oh yeah, he set the standard for Freddy, and I think that's why the remake, besides the fucking child molestation thing, which even though that was the original idea, it was not the franchise, so it deviated from that. But and I can't remember the actor's name, but he, I think, just fucking destroyed it.
Jackie Earl Haley, I think it was. Yeah. I'm not that mad about his performance. It's just it's Freddy. There's no one else apart from Robert to do it, and Yeah, I think Jackie did the best he could with what he was given. Phenomenal actor, but it's just not his role. The boots were just too big to fill.
So, well, I mean, that's the other thing with Freddy Krueger that is unique. It's not a Jason Voorhees where it doesn't fucking matter who's playing it because there's a mask. Michael Myers, there's a mask. Leatherface, there's a Leatherface. Right? So now Leatherface is it's going different directions, so it's whatever. But Freddy Krueger is the one where it doesn't matter burn or not, you're seeing this face.
Yeah.
And I think even without Wes Craven's genius behind it, people still wanted to see Robert Englund because he's a phenomenal actor regardless.
Oh, yeah.
But that is all I have for part 5. So do you want to lead off the rating?
So, in conclusion, I would say part 5 misses the mark on quite a few aspects that it could have really succeeded at. I think if it went more with the gothic tone that it was presented with in some shots, it could have been a huge success. Well, not huge, it could have been fine. But no, it misses the marks more than it hits them, as it does with part 4. So for acting, I gave this one a 5. I actually didn't mind the acting. I think everyone gave a great performance from what they were given.
I'd have to agree. I want to go with a 5. The gothic undertones, I think they had a lot of potential to kind of revert back to the scenery and just the overall forecast of the very first one. And yeah, like you said, they missed their mark. As far as the characters, yeah, I want to go with a 5.
I thought the deaths were some of the best. Even though there's such a low body count of 3, all of them were just done so beautifully and macabre in their own sense. They were all so well executed. I'd give the deaths a 7, but with the gore, there's not much of it, which I'm not mad about because the deaths were just so good. You don't really need the gore if you've got that element there. But so for gore, I gave it a 4.
So with the deaths itself, I want to go with a 6.5, and the only reason I want to go just a hair lower is
it Greta?
I thought about that, but I couldn't have been that guy. I think it was because the body count was low.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that, I would have no argument with 7. The gore, again, Greta was disgusting. It wasn't gore. It was just overall grotesque. But something that I am going to consider, even though it wasn't blood and guts, is Mark's death, because we watched the color, which essentially was life force, drain out of.
Yeah.
So I have to go with a 6. I think that was creative in itself, and I think that was able to play the part in place of gore. So I want to go with a 6 for that.
Brilliant. But I think the lowest score I gave it was a 2 for the plot, because it just they could have done something, and it just, there's elements where you can see there's been scenes taken out and it's not fully working. So I gave it a 2 because it just loses itself and it can't seem to pick itself back up on its feet and take itself seriously. Which, again, is a nightmare film. It's not meant to take itself that seriously, but it just, as a fan, when you know the quality of work that can be produced from these type of films, with part 1, part 2, part 3, it just flies under the radar.
I am going to agree with you on it too. And like I said earlier, I think it focused way too much on the development of Alice and the unborn kid. I think it hopped around a lot. Going back to the gothic scene, I think it had its potential and it missed that. So I can't disagree. I want to go with a 2.
Fantastic. So overall, out of 10, I'd give this film a 4.
I would say a 5, and I want to go a little higher just because it was still a step up from part 4. It had what I felt was more potential, even though it didn't hit the nail. It tried, so I can give it that much. So I want to go with a 5 for that.
Well, I think that wraps up A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child.
So
Time
what?
to move on to bigger and better.
And that's interesting that you say that. But what I would like to do, as long as you're all right with it, is I would like to take a 15-minute break.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Yeah.
All right, so we'll be back. It is 7:07 Eastern Daylight Time right now. What would that be? About 7:23, 22?
Yeah, yeah.
All right, perfect. We'll be back then. Perfect. All right, welcome back. So again, I'm Band-Aid Specialist here with HorrorRant. We're going to continue on this episode with Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare. I thought this was an interesting movie. I don't want to say it's one of the best. I don't want to say it's one of the worst, but it tried to end the franchise in an extraordinary way. I'll give it that. What do you think?
I think this movie is the reason that people were able to sleep again. Because it bored the fuck out of people. No, I'm being too harsh for it. It's not a perfect movie. It's so far from perfect, but it's got a charming quality about it that I don't know. I just seem to enjoy watching it.
Well, one thing that I'll give you that absolutely it does have that quality to it. They really did try. The issue with this movie in particular, not so much compared, but the same with any other movie, that your intent is to end a franchise. They did that with the tagline. They saved the best for last. And then it gets revitalized. So, at that time, you're looking at, okay, this is it, but it's not. But, with that said, I have the trailer for this pulled up. I did watch this trailer right before restarting the stream, and the graphics, I think, look worse than Nightmare 5. I'm fairly certain somebody pulled this from an Android phone. But here is the 1991 trailer for Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare.
As a boy, he was always different. No one understood him.
You ready for it, boy? It's time to take your medicine.
Thank you, sir.
No one could control him.
Go inside, honey.
But now, it's a new
This
beginning.
quality is terrible.
The beginning of the end for Freddy.
Every town has an Elm Street. Screaming while the bus is in motion.
It's your mind or go for it.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul too.
We're gonna have to hit him with everything we got.
Now I'm playing with power.
We're in Twin Peaks here.
It's gotta be me and him.
You want to live?
Maggie, what's up? What's with?
So, I apologize to anybody that was watching. I just realized that I didn't even have it playing. So, again, I apologize. We're going to restart it. It's a good thing I decided
As
to
a
look over
boy,
to my other screen.
he was always different. No one understood him.
You ready for it, boy?
This tortures the shit out of me. I hate this
Take your
trailer.
medicine.
Thank you, sir.
No one could control him.
Go inside, honey.
But now, it's a new beginning. The beginning of the end for Freddy.
Every town has an Elm Street. Screaming while the bus house is in motion!
It's your mind or go for it.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little soul, too!
We're gonna have to hit him with everything we got.
Now I'm playing with power!
We're in Twin Peaks here.
It's gotta be me and him.
You want to live?
Maggie, watch out! What's with kids today, huh?
Freddy's Dead. The final nightmare.
Great graphics.
They saved the best for last.
All right. I'm going to let you go ahead and start this one off. 'Cause I have a lot to say, and I'm going to be entirely honest, there's really not much like good things that I'm going to say.
Right, I'll start with a positive, because I don't think there's going to be many. Okay. So, I enjoy the characters in this one. I think Tracy is a standout. She's this typical tough girl who's got issues. I think she's one of the best parts of it. I do enjoy Maggie every now and then. Well, Catherine, whatever you want to call her. I do. I don't necessarily see her as a final girl, someone to root for. I think they casted wrong with that role. I don't see myself liking her as I did like the other protagonist. She's not Kristen or Nancy or Jessie. And I think the background characters like Carlos and Spencer, well, not Spencer, I actually don't like Spencer, like Carlos. So Carlos, Tracy, sometimes Maggie, occasionally Doc. They are the best parts of this film, where it's these kids who you're going on a journey with, and it just doesn't work. I can't say anything nice.
So I'm going to start from the beginning. John Doe.
Oh, what a fucking prick.
That I thought his acting was horrendous. And not his overall acting. I don't want to say that, but when he is brought to the shelter and he is being questioned by Maggie, he has essentially like this manic response to her, where it goes from an extremely high where he yelled, and then now we're back down to silent. And that's not like you have to commit to one or the other. I understand the mixture, and that's fine, but that kind of an immediate letdown is weird.
Yeah, especially considering he is our main focus for like the first
it's like
40 minutes of a movie.
I was gonna say it's at least into the second act.
Oh yeah.
And I think what agitates me so much about him is that there's nothing that we understand about him. It's just a random guy that shows up at the beginning of the movie. He has no correlation to anything that happened in the past, and not that Maggie did either. They tried to explain that, and so be it. But we don't know who she is. It's just another character. And mind you, like I said, for part 5, we just completely dropped Alice. So we're dealing with literally a whole new set of characters, a whole new set of toy mates, and the only one that we know is Freddy Krueger. Which brings me to an even more significant point, is he just randomly comes back at the beginning of it. So it completely washes away the ending of part 5 where he's shoved back in the womb and they are locked down. We have no clue how the fuck he got out with Amanda.
There's no resolution, yeah.
Exactly. Like even when the school kids are making fun of him, there's no mention of Amanda Kruger. And it's almost like that entire like plot just kind of dissipated.
Yeah. It's just such a letdown. Like if you're going to bring in brand new characters, at least make a familiar plot that the audience can link itself to straight away. Be like, right, we're going in with this knowledge. We can at least try to make sense of it. But no, if you throw in a brand new plot with new characters, and essentially it's a new Freddy.
Which Robert Englund's performance is still phenomenal.
Yeah.
But it's just it almost feels like such a letdown. Like your intention is to end the franchise. The movie is how long? It's like what, maybe an hour and a half long?
Yeah. Something. Yeah.
And you couldn't add in maybe even 5 fucking minutes to explain how we got from point A to point B. No, we essentially revitalized a franchise that's getting dumped. Lisa Zane, who played Maggie, I thought she did an okay job. It was almost like emotionless acting.
Yeah. It kind of fits how this whole movie is as a general. It's just there. You can't really do you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of one of those Hallmark one of those Hallmark movies.
Straight to video release.
Yeah, this is what this film should have been.
I don't disagree. I believe it or not, I liked Doc as a character. I thought I felt that he was not utilized enough because we really didn't understand Doc, but he was a major selling point in the plot because he was the one. He was that in between, the understanding, the maybe you guys are a little tiny bit crazy, but I'm going to help you figure it out. And we didn't get that until all but the third act when he confronted Freddy himself. But when he woke up, he was hooked up to an EEG. He had alarms rate. He knew what he was doing.
He's a smart guy.
Exactly. So with that, and I've said this countless times, and I'm going to say it again, not where this movie fucked up, because the whole movie is a fuck up. Where this movie trashed itself again is we brought the fantasized nightmare aspect where Freddy is in control into the real world. And where we did that is when Spencer and Carlos, when they died, they were wiped out of reality. And that's not factual. Every single other person that had died in this franchise
is remembered.
Exactly. Somebody knows because, like I said, Greta. Like I thought the way in reality that she died looked weird, but they still made it happen.
Yeah, given what was happening in the dream. Yeah,
exactly. And all of a sudden, like Freddy kills these people, and the purpose of this, because he even says it, that every town has to have an Elm Street. They want people to remember, or he wants people to remember. He wants this brand new playground. So for what purpose are we going to wipe away any kind of memorization of the people that he's killing?
Exactly, because it kind of contradicts its own plot. If he's wanting people to remember him, and yet the people who he's killed are getting completely erased from time, no one's going to be able to talk about them.
Now,
So what was his plan, to kill the entire group of kids that were focused on in this movie? So then no one remembers who they are. So it'll be basically back to square one. It completely fucking runs itself over.
it does, and I almost hate to give it this credit here, is if they were planning a requel, which at this point nobody really gave a shit about that kind of terminology. That was never anything up until newer ages. But if they were planning something like that instead of just shutting down the franchise, you may have an argument for why this film should succeed. But when this is supposed to be the end of the end, you set up so many loose ends that it's ridiculous. And what's even worse is that they're never brought up again.
They just don't go anywhere.
Exactly. And even when Freddy's in front of Doc and he's cutting off his fingers talking about how many, or like the ways people tried to kill him, there were 5 films preceding him, or preceding this one, and he mentioned 3 ways they tried to, like, that's not how that works. We can't just pretend things didn't happen. Like, we might try and fix them, but it stayed on a steady timeline. This fucking franchise doesn't stop just because we're going to end the franchise.
Like, all the history in it is still relevant, and even in this film, which brings me to another point. How can an entire town just lose all the kids?
That was the, and I don't even want to say that was the dumbest point, because you had a town that they had essentially a carnival. I don't even know if I want to call it that, because that would have been a half-ass carnival whether you're an adult or a kid. But they had a carnival, and we're accepting that it was like a family event, and there was no family, they were just adults. And then they go to the schoolhouse, and you have somebody that's obviously in complete psychosis talking, like, essentially running through American history, or just history overall. And Freddy keeps getting brought up. And then there's the babysitter that recognizes these people, but there's no understanding as to why. Like, maybe for Maggie, as it starts to fan out, and we find out that is Freddy's daughter. Yeah. That makes sense. But John Doe, we have no fucking clue who he is. He died, and I didn't even give a shit. Truly, because his name was John Doe. John Doe is literally that for somebody that you don't know their name. like, how am I supposed to feel anything for that?
It again, point where you just said about people teaching them about American history. Again, it completely contradicts itself, because Freddy's saying that people have forgotten him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, clearly they've not forgotten him if he's being brought up in this fucked up Springwood.
Absolutely. Where truly one of the only times that in this franchise, even though it was a crossover, the time that people forgetting Freddy was a major plot point was Freddy versus Jason. Every single other time he wasn't forgotten, somebody remembered him, and then we have Freddy's dead. And like you said, off of what I said, is he's forgotten, but everybody remembers him, and that's not forgotten. That's ridiculous, is what that is. Like, that's lunacy.
I'm starting to think this film knew that it was just a pile of shit, so they started to parody itself with the messed up plot and the terrible acting. It does seem like it's a shitly meta version of itself. There's just so many things that don't add up. but it works in such a strange way.
Which maybe for 1991 this made sense. But what is astounding to me is if you look, IMDb had a 4.8 out of 10, which makes sense. Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 22. Metacritic gave it a 39%. But out of the Google users that have rated this film, 80% like this film. And maybe there's the nostalgia factor. Like we talked about the cultural indifference of the last one and the timeline indifference. Maybe that's what it was, that there was the nostalgia factor. But there were, out of the things that I actually liked about this movie, the things that I liked about this movie were so overrun by the things that I didn't like about this movie.
Yeah, like it's just got so much going against it. They could. I did like the setting of Springwood, all derelict and stuff, with no kids. I thought that was a nice plot device, that having all these people, and then you don't even notice it when you're first watching it, that there's no kids there, and then when the characters realise there's no kids, you're like, oh shit. I thought that was superbly done.
Absolutely. It had that creepy aspect. And when they were what was it? It was Spencer, it was Carlos, and Tracy, when they were trying to drive away with the van, and they were nothing more than in a maze. That was phenomenal. I thought that was cool because you were again in Freddy's world. You were not getting out if he didn't want you to get out. But,
yeah, and it brings in that aspect of when did they fall asleep?
Right.
You're like, is it the town? Is it just as soon as you step in the town, you're instantly in that hook of sleeping? It just doesn't expand of when someone goes to sleep.
But, and if we are looking at the other movies, and I almost feel like you can't do that with this movie, but if you're looking at 5, how like, now this is a stretch, and I'm understanding this is a stretch as I'm saying it, but if you're looking at the Jacob incident, where it was the unborn fetus, his dreams were controlling Alice, and so forth and so on, it makes sense that Carlos fell asleep in the van, and the map said you're fucked. He woke up, and that was when everybody figured out we're not going anywhere, all that fun stuff. But we turn right back into the reality of things. You're crossing into a line that Freddy Krueger didn't until he was brought into that realm. And that's where I think that the original and I think 3 got it right, because he didn't. He
stayed in a consistent lane. Exactly,
until he was pulled and defeated. And then these other ones, and that was the thing that kept making I don't want to say that was the thing, because there were multiple aspects, but that was one of the things that were a big problem, and that everybody was noticing. And it's like, are we fucking stupid or what? Now I thought there was some interesting aspects. It tried to pull in the psychological aspect with
Tracy and her dad.
With Tracy and her dad, with Carlos and his mom, things like that. The one thing that I absolutely hated, and this was more of a sensory issue, is I hated when Freddy was fucking with Carlos and was scraping his nails on the chalkboard. That makes me cringe to this day. But otherwise, like, it had its potential when it came to the kills, and it, I think for the most part, it lived up to its potential. Spencer's was silly, but I still loved it.
I was gonna say Spencer's is probably the only one I didn't enjoy that much. The only thing I enjoyed about Spencer's is the cameo of Johnny Depp before it happens.
Yes. It was with Spencer, it was weird, and the reason I think I liked it was because well, there was a few reasons. There was a classical kind of callback, which was with the Power Glove. which Nintendo launched for, I believe it was the N64. They launched in 1989. So I thought that was kind of cool because if you're pushing video games and you really want to like stay hyped up or try and like end with a bang or end with younger audiences and that, okay, you pull a Power Glove. Now, where I think that didn't work out is at the release of the Power Glove and then onward, people realized that device sucked. It didn't do what it was supposed to. So you put a device that was trash into a trash movie and you have nothing more than trash. If anything, even if it was a phenomenal device that worked the way it was supposed to and you put it in this movie, you're polishing trash. Like that's really all we're at. But the video game thing, the same thing as Mark's death. In 5, I thought it was creative. And again, speaking on the 1991 timeline, you're putting a character into a video game and they're acting in real time and all that fun stuff. And that, for that time period, was awesome. And at that time period, that's when video games were not so much beginning, but they were really taking off because you had, again, the N64. Nintendo became this bigger entity. That I have to agree was a good shot. It was silly, nonetheless. Absolutely will not say it's not silly. I mean, the one thing where Spencer's getting fucking towel smacked, like that.
By his dad.
Right, like what the fuck is this, right? So, and we don't have much insight. There's no character development. We have Spencer playing on his video game at the very beginning, where his dad came in and pretty much just kind of laid some nonsensical ground rules down, and this is what was up. Tracy, there was no character development. We knew very little that she came from a post-traumatic incident. We didn't know what, other than, she was...
What it showed him in dreams, yeah?
Yeah, and she was apparently, like, touched in the wrong way. That's why she doesn't like getting touched. Carlos said that he learned to stop talking back when it was bad for his health, but we had no insight until it was last minute. So, it weighed very heavily.
Yeah, it doesn't give you the time to get
digest
a feel
it.
for the characters, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely not. And some, like Tracy, she didn't die, but Tracy I felt for. Carlos, again, going back to the cringy aspect, I thought I felt for him a little bit. And then you had
Spencer and John Doe.
Spencer, I didn't really give a shit about. I almost felt like he deserved it because he was just a dickheaded stoner. And John Doe, again, yeah, who can happily try and lead for the majority of a movie, a supposed main character where they don't even know their own name, right? But he remembered the fucking house.
Yeah.
And that's what I don't understand. Like, that's the weirdest concept. The only thing I can think of is that it was ingrained to him by Freddy that he about the house, but and what's the significance of the house? Is that supposed to be 1428 Elm Street, or is that just a house?
It just doesn't add up in many aspects, does it?
It doesn't. No, not at all. And I think that's what's weird about it.
And then, see, with Carlos as well, it's Carlos's death scene. It's such a the one great thing of terror in this film. It's got such a nice build up to it. It's comical. It's awful what happens and stuff, and you can feel his pain. And we've all been in that situation where we've heard something that makes us, body shiver. And then...
Not as amplified, but yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. And then it's just played out really well, which is quite surprising for this film. I'd say it's probably the second standout scene of this film. And then to top it all off, you got Freddy breaking character and breaking the fourth wall, which I fucking love that.
It was definitely an interesting take. The comedic presence was really there. I thought the ending was almost extraordinary. With they brought him out, but it was a father-daughter fight scene. But again, and I said this in the last episode. It's the Springwood slasher. It's this horrible person. Even with the shitty movies, there is this guy, and now all of a sudden he was a picket fence or a white picket fence, running the middle dad, and it's like, what the fuck is this? And it's almost
retcons so much,
right, and it's almost it almost has the undertone of they're trying to insinuate that their viewers are stupid.
I fully agree. We not thought it out so at all when writing this film. They just thought, right, we need to end the franchise. Let's just throw shit together and hope that it turns out decent.
But for the studio, for New Line Cinema, to even be like, all right, so, yep, this is it, and still give them the opportunity, I would have made the best, even if it was the lowest budget film, which it wasn't. The budget for this was $9 to $11 million. But even if we're talking like about $1 million, maybe $2 million, you could have done so much with this film. And I think where the budget really started to push out was the different scenery changes. You did have a lot of scenes. You had a lot more special effects with like the video games and things like that.
Oh yeah.
But that in itself was just flashy.
Yeah, and not all of it looked spectacular. Like
when
you've got those dream worm things, I can't remember what they're called. Those three little tadpole things.
The Dream People.
Yeah.
Which is the dumbest fucking name. For what? So many things. You like, even though we know who Cthulhu is, you could have called them Cthulhu, and I would have been fine with that, because I can at least like, all right, maybe that's a branch of it. Even if it doesn't make sense, that's fine. The Dream People, though, that's like I'm fairly certain my 3-year-old could have thought of a better fucking name. But
it just looked awful. I think that really shows its age as well with this film. With the gimmicky 3D glasses as well, it shows its age.
So, looking up the reviews right now, because this is almost becoming an integral part. So, the very, very top review is a 1-star review. I purchased a Blu-ray box set of Nightmare on Elm Street film series recently to review them, having only ever seen Freddy vs. Jason, which I found out is actually a really big thing. That's a lot of people turn to Nightmare in the new age because they came across Freddy vs. Jason in one aspect or another.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the first Nightmare on Elm Street, but the sequels mostly aren't. They fucked up aren't. These people, man. Aren't anywhere near as entertaining as the first film, excluding the surprisingly good Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. I don't know how it's surprising, but sure. Nightmare on Elm Street 6 was retitled Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, and it can be viewed as a standalone entry because it doesn't carry on the plot from the previous films. It's a brand new story, but canon within the franchise. The acting is pretty hit and miss, but Yaphet Kotto, that's not how you spell his name, but okay. And Lisa Zane were all right. Doc, I think even more so. Lisa Zane, like I said, it's kind of touchy. The camera work in the film was quite different to all the previous movies, in that it was quick transitions, and they use a floating camera instead of a fixed. Give me 1 second here. Use a floating camera instead of a fixed that twists and turns around characters for added effect. I'm not for or against this technique, but it didn't make the film any better, which is absolutely it is. It does reference the psychological twists, which I reference their final verdict. It's not scary and lacked any resemblance of actual fun. The special effects are somewhat unique but poorly executed, which I did agree with the video game. I thought it was very silly. The story does nothing to advance the franchise and rehashes ideas from previous films. Yeah, absolutely.
Fully, 100%.
There are a couple ones. Pretty much the consensus is this is not a very good film. There are some that have higher ratings, but it obviously looks like satire. So
it's more verging on comedy more than anything else, and I think that's not what the franchise intended to be.
right.
This is a complete tonal shift from the first film. In every sequel, you can see aspects of what made the first one so brilliant. If it's the atmosphere or the characters or something completely vivid in each one of them, parts 2 to 5, has got something in there. And then you got this one, which has got no qualities. It's got nothing stand out. It's got nothing to propel it forward as a nightmare movie. It's just, I always describe this film as a fan-made film.
I do not disagree by any means. I think that's the best way. I honestly, I think it's a mix between fan and indie is what this kind of represents.
Yeah.
And I've seen indie movies that are astounding. But I mean, with that, I think we pretty much butchered the shit out of this movie as is. So, do you want to start off with the rating?
Yes. I mean, it's consistently 2 across the board for me, so that gives it a grand total of 12.
I don't have any disagreement with that. I can't. I almost feel like there's some aspects where I want to say more, but I think 2 across the board is adequate.
I will say this in this movie's defense, though. I think this has got to have one of the best introductions of the Elm Street house. You look at it outside, and it's this rundown, it's this pristine up for sale house that the kids go into, and then as soon as they go in, it fucking crumbles and starts shaking, and it turns into the Elm Street house. Oh, in such a beautiful shot as well, and it's the music that accompanies it makes it so distinctive, and it's really, really nice. I think that's the best scene in this entire film.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, absolutely, without a doubt. That, and I mean, it may not push excitement, but Robert Englund standing there with a sign that popped out of nowhere saying every town has to have an Elm Street was, I think, that added the like suspenseful, the oh fuck Freddy's back feeling.
It made him seem like this all-powerful person, because the way it's shot as well makes him look extremely bigger than he already is. So it was
Absolutely.
this disturbing image of him just like arms reaching out, like he owns this world.
Absolutely. But yeah, I mean, I guess that pretty much does it for Freddy's Dead.
Yeah, all props to, what's her name? To Rachel Talalay, is it? The director. First female director of a Freddy film, which, props to her. It's a shame it wasn't as good as it could have been, but,
Yeah, I mean, being a British American director at that point, I think that's great. Matter of fact, let me see here. It looks like beforehand she didn't do many pieces of work beforehand. There was Hairspray, which obviously wasn't anything. There was Android in 1982. Crybaby, things like that. So she at least had some
experience.
exactly, but not anything I think that was equipped to actually finish off this franchise or attempt to finish off this franchise, which obviously that wasn't a thing.
I think it was going to be fucked up anyway. Trying to end a character like that, and you just can't end a franchise like this, which is why I'm so glad New Nightmare came about to actually leave a nicer taste as a final goodbye for Freddy.
Yes. Well, a supposed nicer taste, because then we had Freddy versus Jason. But that one, as of right now, New Nightmare and Freddy versus Jason are scheduled for Monday. But yeah, unless you have anything to add for Freddy's Dead, because I feel like I got most of my frustrations and agitations out for Freddy's Dead.
I will give 2 more points. So, I hated Freddy's makeup in this one.
Yes.
It just looked too plasticky. It didn't look like he was a severe burn victim at all. You could visibly see the makeup, and it was off-putting.
Do you know where I want to compare this to something? So going back, I had mentioned it earlier, or I might have mentioned it earlier, and mentioned it to somebody else. So Goosebumps, R.L. Stein's Goosebumps, the TV series.
Yeah.
The Haunted Mask, the one with the green mask. The way that they had the cheeks lined up there almost makes me feel like was either the inspiration for, which it might have been a later series. I don't remember the actual years that it came out, but it was either the inspiration for Freddy's mask or Freddy's setup there, or Freddy's setup was the inspiration for that fucking mask. Whichever it was terrible.
Oh, it was awful.
So yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think that was one of the worst makeup sessions that could have ever been introduced to a Nightmare film.
It completely changed Freddy. It made him look more human. It made him look more like Robert Englund, in a sense, than Freddy. And I know it's the actor playing him, but if this character that we've had on our in these films, for the past 5 films, you want them to stay consistent, and they kind of kept that near enough with some changes throughout all 5 films. And then this one, it just it breaks this belief.
Absolutely. What was your second point? Sorry.
My second one, right? What was it? I can't remember. No, I can't remember, and it's probably a good thing, because it's probably another negative for this movie.
Oh my gosh! So the consensus is, not just with us, but with pretty much anybody on the internet, Freddy's Dead is better off dead. It was one of the terrible movies, not including the remake, which is an issue in and of itself. But with that ends episode 2 of Horror Rant. This coming Monday, we have planned out for, as of right now, we have planned out for Wes Craven's New Nightmare and Freddy vs. Jason. So yeah, that'll be at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 11 p.m. Europe time. And yeah, I don't have anything to add, unless Cullum does. We can end it here.
No, I'm pretty satisfied ending this discussion of these 2 shit films.
Perfect. Well, I would like to thank anybody that has stopped by.